Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. Make sure you hit that like button, go follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert, and check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter and also sign up for our expert picks, which will give you every single one of our 2019 college football spread picks for just $30. And our Week 5 spread picks are coming out today, so I promise you do not want to miss out on any of that extra college football content. The links for all of those things are in the description below. Well, guys, it's officially hump day, which means we can start looking forward to what Week 5 of the college football season has to offer. And one of the bigger games of this weekend is number 18 Virginia, traveling to South Bend to take on number 10 Notre Dame. We only have two ranked versus ranked matchups this week, and this game is one of them. And it's a pretty big one, more so for Notre Dame than it is for Virginia. But we're going to get to that in a second. We're going to preview both of these teams, kind of highlight what to expect from each of these teams and how each team can possibly win in this game. And I know it's not a conference game. I know it might not be a game that has major playoff implications like Georgia Notre Dame last week or LSU Texas, but this still is a big one that you do not want to miss on Saturday afternoon. This is just the third meeting between the Cavaliers and the Fighting Irish. The last time they met, Notre Dame defeated Virginia 34-27, scoring a game-winning touchdown with just 12 seconds left. Virginia had scored to take in a 27-26 lead with a minute 54. Notre Dame went all the way down there as a top 10 team, I should add, and narrowly survived the Cavaliers, scoring with just 12 seconds left. But that was a long time ago. That was 4 years ago. Bronco Mendenhall has now come in and really transformed this entire Virginia football program. Notre Dame was a top 10 team at the time. They were unable to get to the college football playoff, and now look where they are now. They went to the playoff last year and narrowly lost to Georgia last week in Athens. And of course, we'll touch more on that in a second. But I want to start with why this is such a big game, more so for Notre Dame than it is for Virginia. Notre Dame's schedule for the rest of this season only has 3 games against ranked opponents left, currently ranked opponents, and Virginia is one of those teams. The other 2 are against Michigan and USC. And there's a good chance that when the Fighting Irish meet the Wolverines and the Trojans, neither of those 2 teams could be ranked. Michigan gets annihilated by Wisconsin. USC, yes, beat Utah, but they have a game against Washington this Saturday. So if things go their way, they will remain ranked. If not, there's a good chance Notre Dame might not have a ranked team left on their schedule as they progress through the rest of this season. And that's not going to be very good if they're trying to improve their resume for the college football playoff. A win at Michigan would look great, but once again, if Michigan's not as good as people thought they were, and clearly they're not, might not look as impressive. Same for USC. The Trojans travel to South Bend, and while having wins over Stanford and Utah might look impressive, if USC struggles the next few weeks through Pac-12 play, it might not look as impressive come October when they face off against the Trojans. So this game against Virginia, a guaranteed win or a guaranteed game against a top 25 opponent, would look great on Notre Dame's resume, that if they win out and finish 11-1, which is the only way that they can still make the college football playoff, if they do that, it would help their resume and strengthen their case just a little bit. So it's a much bigger game for Notre Dame than it is for Virginia, although a win for Virginia would probably propel them into the top 15, at least the top 15, if not top 12, and they can maybe start talking about themselves as a potential college football playoff dark horse, sitting at 5-0 and absolutely the heavy favorite in the Coastal Division. So let's start talking about the Cavaliers. The FPI is not too high on them in this game, only giving Virginia a 10.4% chance to win. Not too high and not too favorable for Bronco Mendenhall and his squad. But they've never been one to be favorites. They've always been considered an underdog. So the percentages don't matter. Virginia has the talent to come into South Bend and get a win. The Cavaliers under Mendenhall are off to their best start since 2004 when they started off 5-0. And a win against Notre Dame would match that. Virginia would be 5-0 if they defeat Notre Dame this Saturday. So we're looking at what Virginia has to do and the talent that they have. One thing I want to point out is while they are 4-0, their past 2 games have been fairly unimpressive victories. 2 weeks ago, they beat Florida State 31-24. It took them down to the last minute to stop the Seminoles in the red zone to escape with a win. Last week, they trailed at halftime 17-7 to Old Dominion before the defense woke up and ended up defeating the Monarchs 28-17. Why were those two games so much different than the first two, where Virginia took care of Pittsburgh, who might now be the biggest threat to the Cavaliers in the Coastal, and when the Cavaliers took easy care of William and Mary? The difference is that Virginia couldn't run the ball in the past two games. Against Florida State, the Seminoles held the Cavaliers to just 120 yards on the ground. That, of course, includes Bryce Perkins, a very capable dual-threat quarterback. Against Old Dominion, the Monarchs held the Cavaliers to just 69 rushing yards on the ground. In their win against Pittsburgh in Week 1, Virginia had 129 rushing yards. Against William and Mary, they had 216. So they were very unbalanced. And I'm not dogging, I think people would take it the wrong way. It's not saying that because they can't run, they struggle through the pass, but they made Virginia very one-dimensional. They're going to thrive when Bryce Perkins can throw, when obviously he can escape the pocket and run, but you can also have that three-dimensional, that very multi-complex offense where they're able to hand it off and keep people on their toes. Sell the play action. Get a run game going. Because when you have a dual-threat quarterback and you have a solid ground game too, it's a very difficult offense to stop. Florida State and Old Dominion figured that out, and that's why those games maybe were a little closer than people would have expected. Bryce Perkins, of course, we talk so much about quarterbacks, and we can't afford to not mention him. He's already thrown for 843 yards and 6 touchdowns this season, while also adding 193 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So Notre Dame has to do a great job of keeping him contained in the pocket. If they allow Bryce Perkins to get out of the pocket and make plays with his legs, or just extend plays when he escapes the pocket, once again, I think it will be tough for this Notre Dame defense to stop and finally get stops on the defensive side of the ball. So that's kind of your little highlight about Virginia. Get a run game going. Florida State and Old Dominion figured it out. Notre Dame doesn't have one of the better rushing defenses in the entire nation. They're allowing over 200 rushing yards per game, although they did step it up, I will say, in that loss against Georgia in Athens. And, of course, that was a very heartbreaking loss for the Fighting Irish. 23-17, led 10-7 at halftime, but Georgia finally woke up after that. Over 93,000 people packed into Sanford Stadium, and they won one of the better games already of this 2019 season. But that loss to Georgia, as heartbreaking as it was, I think really showed how far Notre Dame has come in a span of just 1 year. Everybody criticizes the Fighting Irish for saying they can't win the big games. They can't win big bowl games. Look what happened last year against Clemson in the college football playoff. Look what happened back in 2012 in the national championship against Alabama. They can't hang with the big dogs. Well, last week showed that they can. Yeah, sure, they didn't get a win, but they didn't get blown out like many people thought they would. And I think that really does come to show how far Brian Kelly and his Fighting Irish squad have come in just a span of 1 year. And maybe they can kind of get rid of that stereotype that Notre Dame can't play in big games. The Fighting Irish are averaging 39.3 points per game and are allowing just 18 points per game. The same can be said for Virginia, just allowing 18 points per game, and they do boast a very strong secondary. That could be an issue for Ian Book. They're averaging over 300 passing yards per game. Book's thrown for 828 yards and 8 touchdowns. But the Virginia passing defense is allowing just 188 yards per game through the air. So once again, something has to give there. Either Ian Book's going to really get shut down by this Virginia defense, or the Virginia secondary is going to struggle, and Ian Book's going to continue his dominance, much like he has done over the course of the season, through the 3 games that Notre Dame has already played. And I will say that I do believe that he continues his dominance. He threw for 275 against Georgia's secondary. And I might go on a limb here and just say that I think Georgia's secondary, especially in that environment, because I do believe the environment plays a factor as well, played a huge role. And Ian Book was able to overcome that and put up some big-time numbers despite throwing 2 interceptions, very costly ones at that. So what's going to be the keys in this game? How can Virginia win this game? How can they come on the road to South Bend as 12-point underdogs and upset the Fighting Irish? And how can Notre Dame bounce back after a heartbreaking loss to Georgia and keep their playoff hopes alive and improve to 3-1 on the season? Well, for Virginia, if they want to win this game, they're going to have to create turnovers. That's plain and simple. And that might just sound like common sense. Yeah, you create turnovers, you get a lot, you might win the game. You should win the game, especially if you own the edge in the turnover battle. That's not always the case. But Ian Book threw 2 interceptions against Georgia, and those were very costly, changed some momentum, and resulted in some points for the Bulldogs. Notre Dame lost by 6 points. Who knows what could have happened if Ian Book had not thrown those 2 interceptions. Also, Virginia needs to try to force Notre Dame to win this game on the ground. We know what Ian Book is capable of. You've got a matchup of 2 great quarterbacks here, and I'm excited to see it. But we know what Ian Book is capable of. Notre Dame, though, on the ground is just averaging 144.3 rushing yards. Virginia's rushing defense is only allowing 75 rushing yards per game. So if they can shut down Ian Book, if they can shut him down, shut down the passing game with Bryce Hall and Britton Nelson in that secondary, then Notre Dame, I think, will struggle majorly offensively because they won't be able to run as well against Virginia's strong defense, especially led by Charles Snowden and Jordan Mack in the linebacking core. Something to keep in mind for the Cavaliers, and something to keep in mind for the Fighting Irish as well as they're preparing for this game. For Notre Dame, if they want to win this game, they've got to make sure they don't come out hungover. You know, everybody says, especially in the SEC, oh, if you play Alabama the next week, you're going to be hungover. Same can now be said for maybe teams like Georgia and LSU. It's the Bama hangover. Maybe you got killed by a team and you're not mentally prepared the next week. For Notre Dame, they didn't get killed, but it was such a crushing loss. Are they going to be mentally prepared to come back home and play a Virginia team that I think is going to start out fast, start out strong? Notre Dame has to start out fast themselves. They cannot come out hungover. They've got to play with energy. They've got to get the crowd involved. They've got to keep Bryce Perkins contained in the pocket. And most importantly, they have to find balance. They have to find balance offensively. They only had 46 rushing yards against Georgia last week. And I know Georgia has one of the better defenses, not just in the SEC, but in the entire nation. About 46 rushing yards compared to 275 passing yards from Ian Book. They have to find balance offensively against this Virginia defense that is not a pushover. That is not going to be an easy one to go up against. But in the end, I do not think Notre Dame comes out with a hangover. I think Brian Kelly does have his team mentally ready to come out and win this game back in front of their home crowd against a good ranked opponent. I think that Notre Dame doesn't just come out and win this game. I think they play with enough energy that they win this game by at least 10 points. I expect a big bounce-back game from the Fighting Irish to show that, yes, they do indeed still belong in the top 10. And, yes, they do indeed still belong in the college football playoff discussion. So, guys, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure you go follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert. And, of course, check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for the weekly newsletter and sign up for the Expert Picks, where for just $30, you'll receive every single one of our 2019 college football spread picks. And if you haven't heard already, our spread picks are already better than every single analyst at Saturday Down South, CBS Sports, ESPN, Phil Steele, and everyone here on YouTube. So I can promise you do not want to miss out on our Expert Picks. Everything is in the description below. Don't miss out on that extra content. And once again, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.